excited for our guest today. Yvonne Lau and I met about a year ago through one of our corporate sponsors and great friend of Build a Dream, Ellis Dawn, and we've become some really good friends since then. And I'm so glad, Yvonne, that you were able to join me on our live show today on Facebook.
It's a pleasure. I'm super happy and excited to be here.
Perfect. Well, we're really happy to have you. Yvonne Lau is the founder of a tech company called Retainify. So she's going to start off by telling us a little bit more about her company and what they're currently doing to respond to the challenges all communities are facing. And just a background about Yvonne, she's heavily involved in the tech industry and works with a lot of companies. So her and I have been chatting since the pandemic was announced, and she's provided Build a Dream some really great tips and guidance on how to respond to some of the challenges. And I'm so excited that we're going to be able to hear from her today as she shares it with our followers on Facebook. So Yvonne, I'll have you take over. Tell us a little bit more of what, how Retainify is responding. What are you guys doing, and what are you hearing from the tech sector?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely a challenging time for everyone. And, you know, in the tech space, actually in a lot of industry, right? Every industry has been impacted in some ways, but I'll talk specifically around the tech industry right now. And, you know, clearly we're all impacted from the standpoint of revenue. So, you know, whatever projected revenue, current revenue, or just even, you know, the rippling effect from our customers' ability to pay and our customers' ability to pay. So, you know, you see this rippling effect, and of course it's heartbreaking for everyone. And, you know, then there are either a salary reduction in the tech space right now, or layoffs, or you know, work sharing, reduced work hours. So everything's happening right now, and I think every company is trying to be as creative as possible to keep as many jobs as possible, but still keeping the company alive. And just doing projections, you know, anywhere between 6 to 12 months out. So for Retainify, we are a tech company that focuses on making or normalizing feedback in the workplace. So, you know, feedback shouldn't be scary. So if we think about the times that we're in, there is a lot of anxiety built into employees right now, because everybody is worried about the job security. So how do we enable employees to feel comfortable to ask questions and ask some really difficult and challenging questions to leaders without feeling of, you know, any sorts of repercussions and whatnot. So, you know, I think right now of course, our company's value proposition will just have to pivot from here to adjust to what's the new normal today and what's the new normal when the crisis is over. And there's still a lot of question marks, but how we're pivoting right now is to basically, number one, focus on, you know, providing whatever support we can to the customers and also the community. So there are a lot of things that tech companies can enable or support organizations for employees to work from home, work remotely. So these are kind of the things that we're doing as well, and we're offering our services completely complimentary to help everybody get through the difficult times. And we receive a lot of support from the customers, from the communities as well. So from a business standpoint, there's always, you know, creative ways and opportunities to pivot. It's just, how do you change your mindset from focusing on the crisis to focusing on what do you have to accomplish today, right? Or in the foreseeable future, and then what do you have to plan for the new normal? So, you know, Nour, we talked a bit about, you know, kind of the goal setting piece, right? So you see all the sticky behind my wall, you see like all the notes on my chalk wall in terms of all the goals, right? Yes, there's a pandemic. We anticipate crisis happens, you know, different types of crisis happens from time to time. And one of the things that I think every organization can really, really understand now is doing scenario planning and stress testing the business from a, you know, product revenue, financials perspective. So, you know, Nour, I think right now from where we stand is we're pivoting our business. We're focusing on new sets of goals, new sets of target. And I think by being completely focused on the objectives and what you want to accomplish, I really think that will take people out from the current headspace of being stuck into this, every time you turn on the news, there's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of bad news. Let's just call it bad news, right? In the media. But by having these sets of goals and objectives, knowing what you can pivot and how you need to pivot for the future, I think that really helps people to stay focused on, staying true to their passion, their mission, and the work they have to do.
I loved what you said about your mindset and not getting caught up with all the negativity, recognizing that we are in the midst of a pandemic. There's a lot of crises happening around us, and responding to that is very crucial, not only for our mental health, but in order for us to really lead our company. And I was saying to you before we got on Facebook Live, sometimes I go back and forth between getting absorbed with all the negativity, but then saying, okay, what can I control? And what I can control right now is the Build a Dream organization and our mission and how we're going to pivot in times of uncertainty. But then I sometimes wonder, like, do I come off naive or ignorant to what's going on? But then I realize that at the end of the day, Build a Dream exists to empower young women to make career-informed decisions by getting them to consider starting a tech company or going into the skilled trades. And that has not been solved, even with this pandemic. And yes, I do realize that it's really important for us to recognize the steps we need to take to make the community safer. So the first thing we did at our organization, and I mentioned that to you, was we worked remotely the first week that the pandemic was announced. So that was the first thing for me to say, okay, what can I control with everything that's happening in our community? Secondly, is staying home, is not going out if it's unnecessary. So once I realized that those are the steps that I could take regarding the pandemic, then I started saying, okay, well, what can I focus on in my home and in my work? So, but it's been really great to be able to call on you, for example, to reach out for some advice. We've talked about other plans for our organizations to partner together and pivot. And you mentioned people getting really creative. Can you talk about some of the creative ideas that you've seen happening, not only in the tech space, but with some of your network that maybe some of our viewers could really benefit from adopting into their own organizations or companies?
Absolutely. I think so, keeping everyone safe ultimately is the key and number one goal that every business should focus on right now, right? So there are some organizations and businesses that are probably not very comfortable with remote work. So, for example, from an HR standpoint, you do have to make it very, you have to help, the business, the leaders to adjust to this change, which is now being pushed onto their plates, right? Where it's not an option, you have to do it, right? So if I look at it, creativity from, business process perspective, right? How you used to do things, for example, let's say if you were something as simple as doing stand-up meetings where you usually would have enforced everybody to be in the office, to be on time in a certain time of the day. One of the things that you can do, of course, through Zoom and all these conferencing tools that, set a specific time where you're making sure everybody is available, where you have what you call like a virtual coffee chat, and then start, having a stand-up meeting to set objectives for the day, and then do a check-in at the end of the week, but doing it in a most, let's call it, in a fun way, right? Because you think about it, we're in isolation for a very long period of time, with family, with, talk about family. That was the funny piece where this morning I was talking to another clients of mine about, wow, I didn't realize this is what retirement is going to feel like, right? It's really scary, right? Like my husband was just trying to get a bowl of cereal, and I don't know why that annoys me, right? I'm so used to this is my office, right? Why are you here getting a bowl of cereal, right? I just got so annoyed. But then again, right? You take a step back and you're like, no, control yourself. You are the problem. It's not your house only, right? Okay, and that I sidetracked, right? But these are those things that you have to be creative with working with your partners. When you think about your business processes, your remote work processes, whatever happened before has to change. And businesses needs to recognize that as well, right? So, and then there's these like funny things going on. For example, like setting up, a shared playlist, right? So getting all of your coworkers to be listening to the same, I don't know if you really want to do that, right? But maybe give them the option to add to that playlist as well, right? So getting everybody to do something like that. But there is, this really cool, I think everyone's have heard about this, like this party app thing here, right? So, for example, like if you want to do a virtual events, right? So let's say a glass of wine on a Friday, Friday social. You can't do this in person right now, right? So, in addition of changing your, complete work and business processes to adapt to this whole remote work, which you can completely be creative around. And a lot of it has to do with making sure you're setting clear objectives and goal setting for the weeks, right? So as the people manager with the teams or team leaders and whatnot, and then giving, your employees the freedom to do, to adjust however they can, right? So, for example, my husband now, like their HR teams has now imposed, a 1 hour lunch break, because they realize that people working from home, there isn't a clear cut of when you're at work and when you're out of work. So there are people now sending emails super late at night, and then there are expectations that people should respond when they get an email. So when you work in the office, you have a clear distinctions where you don't have now, right? So I see it as there's the process piece, and then there is, kind of the social piece. And then from a business creativity perspective, I think one of the things that is super, super critical is staying up to date with the dynamics and the current trends. While, everyone's anticipating everything is going to go back to normal, but we all are anticipating we're going back to a new normal, right? So the dynamics of, so for example, like something like sick days. So, if you think about you working in a trade industry, for example, right? I think about, so my parents, right? So my dad is always like very proud of the fact that he never gets sick, ever. Okay. So the problem with that is when his employees take like, a sick day, he wonders and he questions, are you really sick? Right. And then we have to coach them and say, no, people do get sick. You are just, I don't know, you're just an alien, right? Because he's like 75 and he's still a mechanic. So he's still running the shop with, my brothers and my sisters, right?
Wow.
So like he's 70, 76 and he's still running the shop. He's never gotten sick. So back in the day, he was less sympathetic when people are sick. They're like, I'm 72 and I never get sick. Why should you get sick, right? So I was like, that doesn't make sense. I was like, you're talking to a daughter that works in HR, right? But then now, 2 weeks ago, I was on FaceTime with him. It was really interesting because he was telling me, he was like, yeah, you know what? Your brother is sick. I really want him to look after his health. So even just something like that, I think, businesses will also have to take into consideration all the policies, the changes, and the dynamics, right? So I think everyone has an opportunity to keep the business running. Of course, there are some certain circumstances where financial could be, a major hit or impact because as a result of the crisis, right? And we have already seen, how businesses, especially in the hospitality space, have shut down, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think while your business is alive, don't shut anything down. And nor kind of what you alluded to earlier, where, like we're always really busy when things were normal, right? We're so busy that we might not have the time to stop and connect to each other and talk about, hey, how do we just not do things, in a routine basis, and let's just be creative, right? Now we're forced to be creative because either you swim or you sink. And it's only creativity that's going to help you create that competitive advantage. So from a career standpoint, same thing, right? So yes, it is a challenging market right now. So, I shared with you earlier, there is this list that is going around of the number of, tech talents that they're currently out of a job and they're looking for opportunities, right? So this was a creative way where an individual set up an Excel spreadsheet, asked everybody to put their names, their LinkedIn profile on the spreadsheets, asked every employer who's currently hiring, put together a tab that has all the jobs that's offered. That's, a creative way to respond to the crisis very quickly. So, if I look at myself and Retainify, I think we're doing exactly that. Is instead of thinking about revenue drop and everything, is what can we do to sustain and stay, alive with our mission, our passion, and keep, ride through the storm.
And Yvonne, I mean, you've provided some really great insights, some great tips, especially the dynamics and the boundaries being set working from home. Even I call my husband one of my new colleagues, and Adam, my 2-year-old son, my colleague. He's my boss. Actually, he tells me what to do and when to do it. There's no such thing as a schedule when you have a 2-year-old at home. So, and I said to my husband was saying how he does not enjoy working from home. He doesn't work remotely. He's always on the road. And I said, this is not a good example of what remote work is like, because we're both working from home and we have a 2-year-old. So the circumstances are a little bit differently. Like personally, I like working remotely. But all that being said, I remember when I first met you about a year ago and you were talking about Retainify, and the platform itself exists to support companies in providing timely feedback and really engaging people, employees in a meaningful way. So that's always been part of your core.
Yeah.
So if we look at the companies that, have often focused on the bottom line, and right now the bottom line is at risk for multiple industries, how does one focus on the people aspect while recognizing that the bottom line is struggling as well? Because I think one of the things that I'm hoping we come out of this is empathy and the value that people bring to communities and how we each play a role in building our community and building each other up. So how would you advise a company that has never really embedded that into their mission or into their workplace culture? How do they do that now in such a time of crisis?
Yeah, and for organizations that have practiced this all along, right? I think they have kind of embed empathy, in their culture of the business, right? But for businesses that have, I'll pick my dad. Okay, he's never been an empathetic person from a standpoint.
Your poor father. I hope he's not watching us right now.
Okay, he doesn't really speak English, so
okay.
Oh no, but if I think about that, right? Like, is organizations that it's not that they don't care about their employees, it's that the priorities is different, right? So, for example, if you talk to one of the one of the writer or VC guy that I love his book, and he talks about how it's important to put people first, because without the people, you're really not going to have a business, right? But right now, like you said, in light of the crisis, right, everyone needs to focus on the bottom line to stay afloat, right? But at the same time, this is where we need empathy the most, right? Because you're talking about, I posted a quote this morning and it's about layoffs, right? But there will be a set of people who's going to, keep their jobs, and there are people who's not going to, be able to keep their jobs. And then there's this thing called, the survivor guilt, right? So, even though you may survive the cuts, but there may be an element of guilt in you, and you feel bad that your colleagues and your coworkers are impacted by this. And I think if employers can relate to that and see that, I think that's one very quick win in having a better understanding of what empathy means in this whole this magnitude of problems that we're facing today, right? So I think this is the time where companies that are not traditionally comfortable with feedback or transparency, this is the time to actually even stay more connected and build more emotional capital directly with your employees. So, for example, there's been a couple of news that went viral where 400 employees got cut through a Zoom meeting, right? That's not building empathy in the organization. And think about the ones that were lucky to have, to be able to keep their jobs, right? Do you think they feel good about the approach that was taken by the employers, and then also the impact by the employees themselves, right? So I think every action, every decision you make, right, it's going to have an impact on how you present yourself now and how you build trust and credibility. So if employers can't think about this in the long term, just know that when things do get better, you're not going to get the credibility. You're not going to get the trust or the loyalty directly from your employees. So if anything you want to be brave and be courageous to do right now is to be as transparent as you can and be as honest and as open with feedback as possible.
I definitely agree with that. And as you know, I shared this with you. shortly after the pandemic was announced. I didn't sleep for a couple of days. I had just gone into Build a Dream full time as the president, and we hired 3 new staff and some were anticipated to start at a later date, and some had just started. And for me, it was really, really important not to lay anyone off, as difficult as it is. And I get it. Like, a lot of companies don't have another choice. But I remember speaking to you and some of my other advisors and my board and saying, I need to do what it takes to make sure that my whole team stays. So luckily we had just received government funding, and we were able to allocate the funds to make sure everyone stays on the team. And communicating that effectively to the team was key for me. And especially the new hires and those that were supposed to be onboarded at a later date and that will still be onboarded at a later date, to tell them that we made a commitment, and recognizing that there is a crisis. People still have their families and their livelihood and want to pursue their passion and something they truly care about. And in all honesty, Build a Dream is a missions organization. So you join it because you believe in the mission. So people have left some really great positions to join our organization. So one of the things that I prioritized was that if me and my team can get through this time together, we are going to be much stronger as an organization. And if we take the time to invest, and I say we because I believe that each one of the employees at Build a Dream plays a role in building a strong culture, and they all are up to the challenge. And I can't tell you how much being transparent and open and honest with the team has brought us much closer. So you talk about not only having those touch base meetings. So we have 2 meetings a week where we touch base and get an update on what we're working on. But then on Thursdays, we have Thirsty Thursdays, where everyone comes on and brings their favorite drink, and we just socialize and we laugh and we talk, and we just take the time to get to know each other. And I talked about last week how the team all did an Instagram story all throughout the day, sharing what it's like working from home. So they brought our followers and our viewers and our partners into their home and shared how they get through their day. And I think that this is one thing that we can come out of this crisis with, is the ability to connect with one another in a stronger way, and really put the value on the people that make our organization succeed through the difficult times. And I definitely feel for some of the industries that are being hit the most, the retailers, the beauty industry, hospitality, those industries had no other choice but to lay people off. And some of my personal friends who run their own companies and their own salons are unemployed now. So I definitely recognize that those are challenges that those industries are facing. What advice would you have for them right now? Like, what could they do, recognizing that the shop had to close and there is no way that they could provide their actual day-to-day service? What could they do in the meantime to at least keep their business top of mind?
No, absolutely. Yes, it is a challenging time. And, to tell everybody, stay positive, right? And, I mean, it's difficult. I really like the fact that, all the stuff you're doing, Nour, and just keeping communication completely open, which is one of the key things. And when we say communication, keeping that open, is for anyone who's in this headspace where they feel like they're super lost because of what's happening in the world today, is to be open to reach out and talk to people. And it's almost like, if you don't feel comfortable being vulnerable, if you don't feel comfortable letting yourself feel the way you want to feel, but being able to be vulnerable in front of people, you're really like bubbling things up inside you, right? But I think for anybody who's kind of stuck in that situation where, unfortunately, yes, you will recognize that this is what's going to happen to your business. And if the worst case scenarios is that your business is going to shut down, but you are not going to be shut down. You're still going to be alive, right? So what it means is that there's so many more things and more opportunities that you can look forward to, because you are the last person standing and you're still here. So I will tell everybody, like, you know, I think about it, right? The worst case scenario, what can happen to Retainify? Okay, well, the worst case, okay, now this is, you do, you know, your management consulting, right? You do your scenario planning and you do the worst case scenario possible is that Retainify cease to exist, right? Okay, well, what is going to happen? Okay, the business is not here anymore. There will be some financial impact, right? But the people who love me and the people who believe in me, they're still here. I am still alive. I just need to look forward to, you know, or plan, you know, my next goal. What is my next adventure? By focusing on these things, I think it really helps people to fight harder today. And if you, you know, make it amazing. And if you don't, but you know you've given all you've got, you're never going to look back and regret it. And because you're still here, you're going to be able to start a new adventure because you just ride through something pretty crazy.
Crazy is a great word to describe what's happening right now. But you talk about the mindset and you talk about the ability to be mindful in what you're doing and what role you still have to play, and that at least you have your health and your family and those that love you. How do you build such a strong mindset? How do you build the confidence in times of so much uncertainty? So what are some practical tools or advice do you have so that those listening could say, okay, well, who do I reach out to? Like, how do I know who to reach out to if I don't even know what I need right now?
So there is, you know, the emotional, I'll say, like, there's the physical one and there's the emotional one, right? So if I look at these two things, they do both, like, I need both the physical and the mental, right? So the one thing you definitely can control right now, right, is, you know, sleeping well, eating well, and exercising, right? So these are things that actually does help you improve your mental health, right? Like, you can imagine if you're eating junk all day, you're not going to feel good about yourself, and that's going to impact your mental health, right? Like today I was super good. I ate apples and peanut butter.
My favorite combination. I had it with oatmeal.
Yeah, but I don't know, tonight I might just like, well, I had apple and peanut butter, so I'm going to reward myself to some ice cream, right? The physical, like, I think the physical aspect, like, so for example, you're cooped up in the house all the time, and I know we need to practice social distancing, right? But, you know, to be able to just go outside and just, you know, if you have a pet, if you have a dog, walk your dog, right? If you don't have a pet, like, you know, do some yoga or just walk outside, you know, and just, you know, take a stroll and still keeping that distance from people, right? So there's the physical aspect. And then the mental aspect is, at times when you feel vulnerable and you don't know who you can be vulnerable with, right? There are people like you know, deep inside, you do know who you can talk to, right? But I almost would challenge people sometimes to reach out to an old friend. So one of the things I was reading, Bill Gates, like, he posted something about like 3 things you should do in your life, right? And one of the things is rekindle like old relationships, right? Because you never know what will come out of that. So, you know, 2 weeks ago, I was, you know, when this whole thing started, right? And I was in transition, like, Nour, kind of like where you guys were heading, you're getting ready to scale, and we were getting ready to scale. We were in the Venture Lab Tech Undivided program. There were videos and things pumping out. It was like super exciting. And then things start crashing down, right? And then I remember I just like, I need to be vulnerable, and I don't know who I can be vulnerable with, right? Yeah. Sometimes it could mean everyone, right? But other times it could be an old friend. So I have an old friend who lives in Sweden right now, right? Yeah. And I love her to death, and I haven't spoken, you know, to her for, you know, we haven't spoken, you know, for a while. So I reached out and said, hey, you know, I'm feeling sad, right? And it was just through that one discussion, I felt a lot better. And I even, you know, go back to the times when I was working for Starbucks in the early 2000 years, right? In the early 2000s, they were expanding too quickly. They hired a new CEO, and he took the expansion to a level where it really shouldn't have gone, you know, that scale. It was scaling way too fast, right? And the business couldn't cope, right? And Howard Schultz, who was the CEO at the time, well, he came back and took on the CEO when, you know, that CEO got fired. But he became like, you know, super vulnerable. He actually cried when he had a town hall with everyone. So we were dialing in remotely, and then there were people actually, you know, in the audience, and he actually let himself be vulnerable with everybody in the organization, and he cried and he apologized, right? He apologized to the people that he's created jobs and then took it away from them so quickly, right? So, I think there are times where it's all and almost like just challenge yourself, right? It's during difficult times where who are the real friends and real people who really are going to be here rooting for you, right? Cheering for you. So try being vulnerable with everyone, or try rekindling an old relationship and meet up with talk to an old friend.
That's great advice. And especially now that we have the time, like I often used to think, oh my, if only I can have more time. And I'm realizing this is in the midst of all the challenges. One of the things we are getting is more time to talk to friends, to talk to family. Yes, the social distancing makes it difficult to see people in person, but this is the time that we can rekindle those relationships, reach out to people that we've missed over the years, but also pick up one of your favorite books that you've been wanting to read for so long, but never felt like you had the time. I know for me, one of the things that I've been doing is I take Adam's my son. I take him for a walk every day, and while I'm giving him a walk, he's going for a walk. I'm listening to a podcast, and I feel fulfilled. He feels fulfilled, and it's just a great time spent with him outside in nature while practicing social distancing. So I think that those pieces are really valuable as we try to navigate this new norm. And I agree. When things go back, it's going to be a new norm, and practices like working remotely, building trust amongst teams, building, feeling more comfortable being vulnerable in front of your colleagues, feeling okay in making mistakes. And then learning from those mistakes and then moving along is going to be really key. The first thing that as a team we talked about is we might make a million mistakes in the next couple of months, but if we're going to make that many mistakes, this is the time to make it, because truly no one could have planned for what's happening today. And being able to change the course of our organization, like we had to cancel 6 events, as I mentioned to you. And we were just in the middle of really scaling the organization across Canada. We had our first event. We were about to have our first event in Calgary in May. So making that difficult decision to cancel all those events. And then after working on this since 2014, working through Build a Dream, and 6 years later, being at that moment in your organization's timeline, and then having to scale back was very, very difficult. But we look at the positives every day and we're like, okay, well, we've been talking about wanting to go digital for a very, very long time, providing those digital resources and tools. This is the time that our organization can really focus on that. This is the time where we can all learn different digital tools so that we can manage our work remotely, especially as we lead a national organization. Our organization's physically located in Windsor, but we service communities across Canada. And, being in the tech sector, the best way you could do that is digitally. So this is something that we've taken on as a challenge and as an opportunity to be able to build that out. But one thing I found is people's openness to want to help you during this time. And even while they're trying to figure out their own challenges, their willingness to say, we believe in what you do, how can we help? And I can't tell you how many of our corporate partners have reached out and said, listen, I know must have been a really difficult decision for you, but just know that our company stands behind you and we want to see you succeed. We have a company that we are yet to announce that's sponsoring our office space. And to be honest, I thought during this time that would be changed because they're probably going through financial challenges. But Yvonne, I just had a conversation with them yesterday, and they are more than open arms, wanting to give us as much support and as much help, recognizing that our small organization also is being hit through revenue challenges. And they want to see us exist beyond this pandemic. And I think that that's the value in being vulnerable, in being open to learning new things, taking the opportunity to feel comfortable with the uncomfortable, and knowing it's okay when someone asks you a question to tell them you don't have the answer, and that you're going to go figure it out. And I think that that's all we can count on during this time, is that we're all in it together. So I remember, before we go, I loved your story about how you started Retainify, and you're a female in a tech startup leading in the time of a pandemic. So can you just walk us through why Retainify? Why did you start this company? And for all those at home, what advice do you have for someone that has been dreaming of starting their own company? What could they do now during this time to maybe start building those steps to get them there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, Retainify was an interesting story because it started out as a business school project, and I was trying to solve a real business problem where we couldn't get people to feel comfortable in giving honest feedback as to why they're leaving their organization, right? So they worry about, you know, closing the doors behind them, or, you know, upsetting certain management, and then not, you know, there's just all these sorts of repercussions, right? So I think it made me realize how uncomfortable it is for the person giving feedback and the person who will receive the feedback, right? And I think it's almost like when they say, you know, well, it's normal, but there's nothing normal about feedback, because people that are giving it or receiving it, either way, it's a very uncomfortable process, right? So if you want to, like, and then also, like, you know, when you don't give feedback frequently, then you become really bad at giving feedback. Basically, you suck at it, so that you're less confident about giving feedback. So each time you have to give feedback, yeah. So you know, like, it just makes it really awkward, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's more increasing, kind of like, you know, if we increase the frequency and using our technology as a catalyst to encourage more feedback, it becomes normal, like, you know, brushing your teeth, or, you know, like, and when you hear the word feedback, like, hey, Nour, I have feedback for you, or Nour comes to me, you come to me and say, hey, Yvonne, I've got feedback for you. I'm not gonna, oh my God, what did I do? It must be something bad, right? So I think ultimately our goal is to help, you know, organizations normalize feedback in the workplace. And then how do you make the data work for you and tell you more about the business, where, you know, relationships are weak in certain parts of the organization, and how we can rebuild that through conversation, one conversation at a time, right? But for anybody who's got, you know, some spare time right now, I agree with you more. I think this is the time where you pick up your favorite book, you know, pick up your favorite hobby. So, you know, one of the things I've always wanted to do was to, you know, keep learning Spanish, right? So now I've got the app, because everything is like 50% off, right? So take advantage of this discount now, guys, okay? Take advantage of all the free e-learnings online, right? This is the time where you're getting like more than half price off on all the training, you know, programs online. But for those who's looking to build a business, or who's, you know, this is one thing, you know, I will share with everyone, that that's something that, you know, my dad shared with me. So my parents, they probably went to school up until grade 3, and then they had to, you know, they started working at the age of 8. They were telling me that they used like fake ID cards and whatnot just to get a job in, you know, the world when they were. Yeah, so that's how, because like I think you're supposed to have like, you know, an ID card to get a job, but at a certain age you don't really have an ID card, right? So they used to borrow the ID card from the neighbors just so they can apply for a job and then get a job, right?
Oh my God.
My dad was telling me all these things, and then when I was sharing with him about, I'm looking to start a business and I'm scared, because like, you know, like you alluded to earlier, Nour, where you had to, you know, you're basically leaving a full-time job, right? That's a huge change to, you know, the financial aspect, right? And now you're gonna go full-time at Build a Dream, right? And that's your passion. That's a very scary step to take. But this thing stick with me, and my dad said, everyone should try entrepreneurship once in their lifetime. Nour, you and I both know we learned so much from the process.
Oh,
Yeah.
like the biggest lessons I've learned was after becoming an entrepreneur. And I could tell you, as challenging as this time is, I know I'm building the skills and the tools I need to grow the organization even further and to build myself as a leader and as a professional. The amount of opportunity that there is now, even in the midst of a crisis, if you're open to that, the amazing things can happen once we overcome some of these challenges. So
Exactly.
I definitely do. It's tough. It's funny, like, and I want you to continue, but before leaving my position, we had the big announcement from the federal government where we received our funding to take our organization across Canada. So that's when I was essentially forced to make the decision as quickly as I did. And I remember talking to Mo about it and saying, listen, like, I have to go full time into Build a Dream and I have to give in my notice because we're receiving the funding and we need to get the project started in 2 weeks. And in order for me to do this successfully in the next 2 years, I need to give it my all. I cannot be working full time, managing this as a side hustle, going to school, and then being a mom of a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And I said to him, what's the worst that can happen? I'm like, if it doesn't work or I realize I didn't make the best decision, I'll find another job or I can go into a different role. Like having that mindset that like it'll all work out.
Yes.
But then I didn't realize we were about to go into a pandemic and a recession. 2 things that were not planned and that are pretty bad. So that could really mean that if this doesn't work out, I don't have a job at the end of the day. But after a couple of days of realizing, you know what, it's going to be okay. And at the end of the day, being an entrepreneur teaches you so much. Thinking quick on your feet and being resilient and problem solving.
No, but right, Nour, but you just said it right there, is that, you know, through the entrepreneurship journey, you've learned so much, right? So you basically can completely pivot your career, right? Whatever you were doing before, you started full time with Build a Dream. There's now all these other, you know, career that you can actually venture into, because even for me, for example, I've been in HR for a long time. Actually, now I can actually do so many different things. If, like, you know, worst case scenario, if Retainify cease to exist tomorrow, right? I actually don't have to go back into HR. I actually can venture into all these other channels because of, you know, the experience I've gained over the time, you know, the course of, you know, the years of building the startups, right? So that's, you know, what you were alluding to earlier about being creative. So you're being creative about your career pathing as well, right? It doesn't have to be, you know, a straightforward, you know, type of a career pathing, right? It could be, you know, much bigger than you think now that you've got all the skills. So for the people out there that are still, you know, trying to figure out what they're going to do with all their free time, and you have a business idea, this is the best time for you to, you know, gather information. You know, ideation, it takes a long time, right? To build, you know, to look into an idea, and then the feasibility of an idea, that takes a long time. You have the time to do it right now. I encourage everyone to do it. And, you know, that could be the beginning of your entrepreneurship journey. And you might start this in the very beginning, and you might come to the realization, you know what, I don't like this whole journey, right? Or you may decide that this is what I'm going to do, right? So
yeah, it's true, because deciding that it's not your journey, and that's the essence, I feel, of what we offer young women across Canada. Is, I often say, like, we focus on 5 pillars, and the pillars that women are underrepresented, including tech. And I say, if a young woman comes to our event and realizes she does not want to pursue the skill trades, science, technology, emergency response, or even entrepreneurship, she made that decision, and there's power in choice. And I think that's the beauty of exploring different opportunities that are out there and taking the time now, if you do have the time. I mean, I have to acknowledge and recognize that some people working remotely are single parents and have children, so they don't truly have the time to balance it. I face a challenge on working from home, both me and my husband working from home with a 2-year-old who is constantly needing our attention and deserves our attention. So that's a challenge. But I think that one of the things I loved that you said that I really want to drive home, and that I've been practicing daily is that mindfulness and that mindset. Is we do have the choice to decide, are we going to be absorbed by all this negativity, or are we going to channel all this energy and the time to focus on things that we can control? And it's been a lifelong journey for me to have that mindset. And trust me, the last couple of weeks have really tested that. But I love chatting with you. And so for all those watching right now, Yvonne, you and I had talked about wanting to launch a project, you and I, for almost a year now, since we first met last January in 2019. And you were one of the first people I called when this pandemic happened. I was like, listen, we're all working remotely and things are a little crazy now. We should touch base and chat about all those ideas that we had last year. And I'm so glad I did, because you've been such an instrumental voice and positive energy that I needed in the last couple of weeks. So I'm so thankful our journeys have crossed, and that you continuously support our organization, but even support me through some of these challenges. And you are such a dynamic role model and speaker. So once this is done, you need to do more speaking engagements, and I'm going to hold you to it, because I know when I first asked you to sit on the Build a Dream panel, you're like, Nour, I don't know how I feel about this, and it was uncomfortable, but you're just phenomenal. You're so
even this, Nour, but that's, I mean, like, you know, it goes both ways, right? And I can't tell you how much respect I have for you, I have for your mission, and all the stuff that I can learn from you. So, for example, social media for me, it's not like I just have a 90-year-old mindset, you know, when it comes to social media and things like that. I'm not like a social media person, right? So to be in front of camera for me is uncomfortable, but you made it very, very comfortable for me, right? And I came to realize, wow, this is not too bad. This is quite fun, right? So no, but I mean, like, I think, you know, I'm so glad to have met you through Elliston, because I have a lot of respect for everything you do. And again, right, being my family in trade, right? And I worry about their business right now too, right? They're definitely getting, you know, beyond 30% in revenue drop. And I'm trying to do my best to help them, because half of my family actually works, you know, for my dad in the auto body business, right? So, you know, these are things where then, like, you know, I think, you know, you get support from people around you, but you rekindle this relationship. You picked up the phone and called me, and I want to thank you for that and appreciate it.
Oh, Yvonne, you're absolutely amazing. Well, I just want to thank Yvonne and everyone that tuned in today for our Facebook Live series. I'm so glad we were able to get Yvonne. And just to everyone that was listening, I asked Yvonne yesterday, and this was her first Facebook Live, and she did an absolutely amazing job. I can't wait to share this episode. And speaking about my former employer, I'm also an alumni of the University of Windsor, about to graduate with my professional MBA. And today is Windsor Proud. So I'm rocking my Lancer shirt. So for all the alumni that are out there, students, share your Windsor pride. The University of Windsor has played a pivotal role in not only my career journey, but my educational journey. And I definitely miss all my colleagues and all the faculty and staff at the University of Windsor. And the University of Windsor is one of our biggest corporate sponsors. So I just want to give them a shout out and a thank you. And for everyone rocking their Windsor Proud gear today, I thank you. And I'm really excited to continue on this Build a Dream journey as we try to stay as positive as we can through some difficult times. And just know that Build a Dream is here to support everyone. And we will have more amazing guests like Yvonne. And hopefully we can have Yvonne back, because I think there's a lot of conversations there that I'd love to dig a little bit deeper. So if you do have any more questions, please share them with us at info@webuildadream.com, or post some of the questions on our Facebook page, and we will definitely get Yvonne to answer your questions. She is a leader in the tech industry with so much information, and I can't express how much she's helped Build a Dream and helping me pivot. So I highly encourage you to tap into Retainify and learn a little bit more about their platform, because this is the time where we can all learn how to give feedback and take feedback and build a culture in our organization that's going to withstand times of crisis. So thank you all for tuning in. And Yvonne, I look forward to chatting with you after this.
Likewise. Thank you, Nour, and thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.